Just been to Sainsbury's to fill up. It's 165.9 super unleaded, or E5. £40.98 for 24 litres. That's fuel today. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about driving styles today. Just start to touch on saving fuel when driving, okay? I think, to be honest with you, this is the beginning of the end of the motor car as we know it. For some people anyway. Okay, enjoy the video. Right then guys, hello. Clutch and driving styles, okay? Now, I'm now on my way to work and I'm taking a windy road today. So, what I'm going to do is tell you a few things about gear changing style, driving style. Now, you probably already have some type of strategy to save fuel, don't you? I'm trying to keep the RPMs down as much as possible, weight out the vehicle. Unfortunately, this car, the downside is that I need to get up to 2,500 RPM if I'm going to get any type of speed out of it. 2,500, not good. I'm not comfortable because I'm a diesel driver. Whereas with the diesel, around about 2,000 RPM is okay. You start pushing it a little bit, it will start fueling more. But modern cars these days have fueling strategies, and sometimes when you get up to a decent speed, 59 miles an hour, something like that, that is sometimes the best strategy. I don't know what the strategy is for this, for fuel economy, but it's shit. Upside is that I can, when I'm driving, I can do 40 miles an hour in fifth gear, 30 miles an hour sometimes in fifth gear or fourth, so I'm minimising the gear changes, okay? So, let's start off first of all, literally start off, let's talk about block changes from first to third. Okay, I'm keeping my revs down and then up to fifth straight away, and what I'm doing 30 miles an hour, yeah? Can't do it in all vehicles, but you can with some, okay? Now, I use a technique called doubling the clutch, which is literally two operations to change between gears. So that's in, disengage, and then in again and engage another gear, yeah? And that works okay for me, okay? Like this, you see my knee go up and down, don't you? Yeah, I'll actually show you this now, how it's done. Okay, now the second technique, which is probably actually one of the most important, is to drive without a clutch as much as possible. So you even when you're driving, and this is a tip, take your foot off the clutch pedal, because that wears the release bearing. Okay, it's holding it on just slightly, that heats up and it shortens its life, and it also can shorten the life on a small clutch, diaphragm fingers as well. Okay, so I'm in fourth, and no, I'm not, I'm in fifth. Okay, so I can literally pull out a gear, blip the throttle and get it into fourth sometimes. Actually, I'm going too slow. It's a hard technique to master, but basically what you're doing, I can maybe be in third and then I can not use the clutch, and it's hard to do concentrating talking to you and trying to do it, yeah? But sometimes it's about getting the engine RPM right to the speed of the gearbox, okay? And if you can do that and you can do it gently, then you'll be successful. It's a hard skill to learn. The bonus here is if you happen to have a clutch which goes, you can then drive clutchless to get to somewhere at least safe to have the clutch changed. Now, I've got to tell you a story here while we're driving, because it's a straight bit of road, no gear changes. Yeah, the other day, guy I work with was going to Lithuania, and his clutch failed. He couldn't get the parts in our local town, so he had to go to Boston, which is like 30 odd miles. So he drove all the way to Boston clutchless to pick up a clutch, bring it back, and then install it overnight, and then drive over to Lithuania. Yeah, quite interesting actually. Him and his brother did the work. Here we go, farmer pulling across the field, boy. Yeah, so generally what you want to do is minimize your clutch movements. That will save your clutch a little bit more, because every time you're using your clutch, it heats up. Yeah, when you're from start up, for instance, which you can't avoid. Yeah, it turns into dust. It's wear. Okay, the more you use your clutch, the more it's going to wear. Okay, so here we go. Blip the. I can't quite get it. I haven't got it in this car yet, but my other car, I'm okay between third, fourth, up to fifth. Yeah, which is something I was practicing on a hire car the last time I had one. So yeah, basically that's two techniques. Okay, the other one is literally pull it out of gear with no throttle on, and then just use the clutch to engage it. A lot of the time what you're doing when it's out of gear, okay, you're letting the gearbox and the engine just sink that little bit more, because a lot of the wear comes on the bolt rings on gearboxes, and it's usually third and fourth gear will go. Third and fourth, that's the key here. So if you're actually clutchless driving in third and fourth, it's not wearing the bolt rings, okay, as much, because what it does, the bolt ring synchro hub and the gear have to be braked so they synchronize together, so you can actually select a gear. Okay, be careful if you're doing or trying to attempt clutchless driving, because it's quite difficult. Yeah, so one thing you're not allowed to do in a vehicle is to freewheel in any vehicle. However, I learned on a truck course that some trucks will do it temporarily. They'll actually freewheel like now. Okay, they disengage the gearbox, freewheels, and then carries on. Well, your revs drop right down when you're freewheeling, and it just saves that minuscule amount of fuel, but it does make a difference. Yeah, so if you're coming up to traffic lights, stuff like that, you can freewheel. Or if you feel safe that you're actually running at a constant speed and you think it's okay, you knock out of gear just for a small amount of while, let the revs die down, and then when you feel you're slowing up, put it back into gear. Not advisable to do on a hill. Okay, so yeah, these basically are the tips that I would say, and the most important skill is clutchless driving. Okay, clutchless driving, which I'm still trying to master. In this car. I'll get it when I'm not talking to you, yeah, but while I'm concentrating, while you're watching me, it's really hard to do. Right, so I'm going down to 30 miles an hour, and actually what I can do with this, I can pull at 30 miles an hour, which means unless I'm going to go to a stop, or if I'm running 30 and then going into a 40 or 50 mile an hour zone, I can just accelerate and move away. Yeah, so block changes I've just talked about, which are really handy. It actually keeps the revs down on your vehicle. Okay, so say I go into third, okay, on this vehicle, I can then go into fifth, missing fourth, and keeping the revs low down to be able to get along. Yeah, the problem with the clutch is it has an unknown unknown lifespan. Okay, if you have a heavy clutch user, or people who hold the clutch on while they're on a hill and letting it slip and all that sort of business, that's bad news. It's not going to last its time. The more clutch changes you do, town driving for instance, the more it's going to wear up. That's inevitable. It's a wearing item, and it is very hard, should I say. It's not complex, but it's a big job to change a clutch, even in light vehicles. Heavy vehicles even more so, but it's an expense, isn't it, that you don't want something that is a big job to do as a surprise, as it were. Okay, so yeah, I find that light vehicle clutches, there is no time span on a clutch. The guy who I work with, 190,000 miles on its first clutch, whereas we do clutches in heavier or light medium weight commercial vehicles, at 70,000 miles. Okay, it's very much down to the driver's style and the environment it's working in. Motorway driving, obviously, you're not using your clutch much, you're not changing gears much, therefore a clutch will last a lot longer. And this is what I try to do when I'm driving to work every day. I'm watching the speed on my vehicle, trying to keep the RPM down, but also with the clutch as well. So I'll not get it into fifth like that, I'm not going fast enough. So just a few little bits and pieces really to show you. So down on that foot pedal, if you feel your foot is resting on that clutch pedal, take it away. Okay, as I say, it will wear the release bearing quicker. Okay, and some of us guys going to work, we've got really heavy clod hoppers on, haven't we? So the weight will just be that little bit more. All right, so anyway, here ends this part of the video. So how about this? I'm driving to work telling you about clutches. First job I've got to have a look at today is suspected clutch fault, which this one's hydraulic and it does have a little bit of slack. I'll pump this up, don't lose the slack. I think the release bearing has probably had it. Just get it started. Driver reports, can't get it in first, third, fifth. Okay, well, it's not snagging. Yeah, they don't actually feel too good. Yeah, there's hardly anything there, hardly any movement from the bottom of the pedal to get it to move. Jesus Christ, man. Can't pull away in second in these Land Rovers. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have to put a price quote in for this and then change it. Land Rover for me takes me 14 hours to change a clutch on one of these. I know there's some special superheroes about, however that's how long it takes me, which is book time, I think, around about then, 12-14 hours, and we don't have the proper equipment. These poor old Land Rovers on this particular fleet, they don't get a good life because they're supply vehicles or standby vehicles for the subbies, which means the guys that use these don't care about them. But what I'm going to do is change a clutch pack, which is pressure plate, friction plate, release bearing, but I'm also going to do the slave cylinder on these because this is a Ford setup and they're not the best. Sometimes you can't bleed them up very well, so yeah, a bit nasty this one, but that's the way it is. At least it came under here, or shall I say came here under its own steam, which is a bonus really, because sometimes if they get recovered you then have to continue recovery into the workshop. So yeah, life and times of a commercial vehicle technician. This is real life. It's not pretend I've got a vehicle. These are customers' vehicles that have to be turned around because the company that this owns this actually are a electricity company that do all the power cuts or repair the power cuts here. So it's a needed vehicle. So anyway, what I'll do, if you keep on watching, I might give you some insights into clutch changing. There's a lot in this particular change of a clutch. You've got to take a lot of the interior out to get to the gearboxes to disconnect stuff. And I did say gearboxes because it's a Land Rover. There's 2 gearboxes in here and they're damn heavy. Okay, so welcome to my world. These are commercial vehicles. This is an 8x4, which means it's got 2 drive axles. Clutch is gone in that. And the only way you can get to remove the gearbox is take it out from underneath because the body is fixed, which is a lot of hassle. Okay, so this had to be brought into the workshop. It was a breakdown, and the lad that was doing it, a lot of work to get one of these out. The bigger they are, the harder the work. Okay, sometimes, unless it's a 4x4. Okay, so you can see the clutch plate there is completely worn out, right down to the rivets. Driver knew it was slipping, but he kept going and he kept using it until the clutch failed. Okay, so flywheel here is actually cracked, it's overheated, and you can see the bluing there. Okay, that's through heat from the metal, and it's also scored.
So yeah, clutch slipping will actually cause overheating, and it can blow up the flywheel. Smaller vehicles generally they don't crack, but they can have scoring on the surface of the flywheel, which means it needs to be machined or replaced. So here we have the truck flywheel again, and this is a bit of a mess. It's very dusty because clutch friction plate is actually a wearable item like brake shoes. Okay, so you can see the flywheel there, you can see the ridges in it, and all the dust around. So be careful of that stuff when you do clutches. Centre bearing, or that toe bearing as they say, input shaft bearing, needs to be replaced always. Yeah, and look at this is a real mess. That's why the flywheel is so knackered. Alright, so this Land Rover has a transfer box. That's a PTO output shaft, prop shaft outputs. And this is the PTO arrangement, which is just a hydraulic pump. Yeah, all this needs to be stripped out. The gearbox needs to be moved off the back, and then I can drop it down and take the H-box off. When I mean H-box, I mean the main gearbox. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of stripping out on this specific Land Rover to get to it. Cross members, exhaust, prop shafts and such like. So a lot of labour intensive work on this one. And of course tools as well. Now I've done a few Land Rover gearboxes in the past, so I know roughly what I need. Each job is different. You need to, as I've said before, you really need to know what tools you need to do the job. Yeah, and so I've got a big pile of tools that I've used to strip out the gearbox to get to the clutch. Alright, so what you have here is the friction plate, okay, which is, as it says, it does what it says, okay, but you have damper springs in the centre there, okay, so you can see those here. That's just when you take up drive, it just twists a little bit and gives a cushioning effect, and there's also some in there as well, where the input shaft, the gearbox is. This is the friction material, that's what gets worn away. Okay, so the pressure plate, it clamps the friction plate to the flywheel, okay, and that's when it's running. Okay, you put your foot on the clutch and the fingers of the pressure plate are pushed inwards or pulled outwards depending on what it is by a release bearing. Okay, so I told you a little bit about that earlier, and that is what it is, a bearing. Okay, and they do fail. Right, so just as an addendum here, this is a dual mass flywheel, which is a cushioning effect. You can see that there, that's almost knackered. Usually they'll get replaced when you do a clutch. Okay, so our Land Rover here, this is the friction plate and the dampening springs. Okay, and you can already see a fault in it, can't you? Yeah, alright, so you can see that there's damage to that. These springs are usually okay. It's a common fault on lighter commercial vehicles. That those springs will fail, okay, and this has come out of the centre there and it's jammed up, and this is why we've been having problems. And you can see the little bit of wear on the fingers, okay, that's because the spring has worn on it and that's jammed in there, so that's been causing us problems. That is our fault, okay. I can't believe how many clutches I've done that has been this. The pressure plate's been okay, but the spring has come out one way or another. Okay, so I'll turn this over. Fingers do wear actually, and they can break. So these are the pressure plate fingers. They wear on the ends just here, which can be a problem. Release bearings wear out, okay, because they do a lot of work. I've already mentioned that. Have a listen to this. That is actually worn, okay. You always replace the release bearing when you do a clutch change because it's so hard to get at. This is actually a slave cylinder incorporated with a release bearing, which is good, and yes, you always replace them, always. So this you need a tool for to align the clutch plate up with the toe bearing in the flywheel, so when you fit the gearbox it will actually go into place and the input shaft will fit in, and we have to bodge this sometimes. So clutch plate only goes in one way, yeah, and we have to use sometimes black tape with tools wrapped round so we can actually get the right thickness, yeah, and it works. This black stuff is excellent for everything. This is electrical tape. Always have some in your toolbox, because even if you have a universal clutch kit it doesn't always work, but you could always use a screwdriver or anything and pad it out with this black plastic tape, so you have the clutch friction plate in line for the gearbox to go into. Because once the friction plate has been clamped down by this thing here, which is the pressure plate, okay, you cannot move the center plate or the friction part of it, okay, that is actually clamped down, so you have to get that right, otherwise you'll never get your gearbox back in. Believe me, sometimes they don't go right and you wonder why the gearbox won't go. It's because of that, okay? So there you go, guys and girls, just a little bit of a tip and some heads up about clutches. I hope you learned something.